Firstly, we need to know what meditation is. Meditation is the cultivation of the wholesome qualities of our minds. So to cultivate wholesome qualities in the mind, we need to understand that this is the work that's being done by the mind. And we need to remember that when we meditate, there's two things that we need. One is the mind that meditates, and then the objects that we use to meditate on. But the work of meditation is done by the mind, not by the objects that we use, not by the objects that we observe. And the objects are always there. The objects that we can observe are objects of the five physical senses and the fifth, and the mind itself, the many things that happen in the mind. So these are the types of objects we have, 6 types of objects through the 6 sense doors, and they are always there. At any time, we can observe any of these that we choose to. So we don't have to do anything to these objects. They're always there. The work of meditation is to cultivate the wholesome qualities in the mind. What's very important is for that mind that's trying to meditate, that mind needs to work in a wholesome way as well. If the way we try to meditate is with greed or aversion or delusion, then we will be trying to meditate in the wrong way. So if the way we are meditating is that we want something, or we are trying to achieve something, or we expect something while we are meditating, then greed has come in. Or you're practicing and then you're unhappy with what you are facing. You're unhappy with what is happening in the present moment. You don't like the objects that you're observing. You're not happy. You want what is happening right now to go away. This is practicing with aversion. And the last one is when we don't really know how to practice. We're confused. Sometimes we don't understand the principles of meditation, the purpose of meditation, and then we're just doing whatever we think might be right, and sometimes we might be very wrong, and that's meditating with delusion. And what happens when we have greed, aversion, and delusion? in the way we practice, in how we try to meditate. We tend to use too much energy. Because we want something very much while we're meditating, we put in a lot of energy. Or we don't like what we're facing, we're trying to get rid of it while we're meditating, we use too much energy. We don't know what to do, so we try very hard. And again, we're using too much energy. Then we become tense. We become tired when we use too much energy.
The theory by saya, the body I say, then a deep abima out of the simply.
So if we know a little bit about the principles of meditation, the theory that underlies how to meditate, then we will find that meditation is a little bit easier.
So information beta,
so this information we are getting is a form of wisdom. So we are using wisdom in the first sense, which is we're getting information. And having the information that we get, we will then apply this information to the practice of meditation so that we can practice effectively and efficiently. Just being mindful alone is not enough. We always need to know what we are meditating on and how we are meditating. Do we have right view? Do we have the right attitude? We need to understand these things when we practice. So this wisdom, whether it's in the form of information or intelligence or whatever, we need our wisdom to work together with awareness in order to practice meditation effectively. The first thing that Sayadaw would like to address is the issue of yogis using too much energy to practice meditation. They use more energy than is necessary, they get tired, they get disheartened, then they feel disillusioned about meditation and they don't really want to practice.
The definition is
so it's helpful. So it's helpful to know a little bit about the definitions of the elements of mind that go into meditation. So when we are being mindful, there are 5 qualities that work together. They are sati, which we also call awareness, but then there is samadhi, which is stability of mind or steadiness of mind. Virya, right effort. Saddha, which is faith or confidence, and panya, which is wisdom. So we need to know a little bit about these.
So
and we need to know that there is an object that the mindfulness observes. Whatever is being observed has become an object. So it could be the mind itself or something in your body. The mind that is meditating is of course just the mind, and when you meditate, those 5 qualities I mentioned just now, they are working together. So all of us have a little idea about what mindfulness is. We know when we are aware. We know what it's like to feel some steadiness of mind. We know what it's like to make effort, and we can sense whether we feel confident about the practice or not. Often we lack the recognition or the understanding of whether we have any wisdom while we are practicing.
Wisdom,
and where does this wisdom come from?
Knowledge.
Wisdom is panya. In panya, there's 3 types. The first is called Suttamaya panya. That is, we call it information or second-hand knowledge. Because when we get right information, we can apply it correctly, and then we can practice it correctly.
Information information you share information the information you don't charge.
So the purpose of listening to the Dhamma is so that we can get the right information, so that we can use the right information and practice effectively.
The D so that they I put out them a the D so that they I think I tell you, Tani, I'm to a piece of Bama. See the young and what they are, the Rishi.
So in those 5 qualities, the 5 faculties that we spoke about, the first faculty is sati. And the definition of sati is to not forget. To not forget the right object or that which is wholesome in the present moment.
I will chop Bama. I will chop Bashi. I will chop Bago.
So in the present moment, if you know anyone, anything in your 6 sense doors, something physically or mentally, if you know something, it means you have not forgotten this mind and body, then there is mindfulness.
I said, the
So mindfulness doesn't mean that you have to focus very hard. It just means that you know, that you're not forgetting to know in the present moment. And it also means that you continue to try to not forget, moment after moment after moment. And this trying to not forget moment after moment is called right effort. So we'll do a little demonstration now with you. So he's going to ask you some questions. Right now you're sitting. Do you know that you're sitting? Yes? You can feel it? You can sense that you're sitting, yeah? And if you have your eyes open, do you know that you're seeing? Yes? You can see it. Are you sure that you know that you're seeing? Yes? And when did you notice that you're seeing?
When?
When did you notice that seeing is happening? You've been walking around the whole day seeing. Did you know that you were seeing? Or do you only know it now when Seattle asks you to, whether you know that you're seeing? Is that right? Most of the time, we only notice when somebody reminds us. Every morning we wake up and open our eyes, and we can see. But we don't know that we see. Isn't that right? So now when he says, are you aware that you're seeing? You're suddenly aware that there is seeing. Yes? And how much energy did you need to use to know that you are seeing? Not much. Not much at all. Is it hard to know that you're seeing? No. Is it very tiring? No. So meditation is not tiring. And it's not difficult. Just knowing what's happening at your sense doors means you have mindfulness. When you see, you know that you're seeing. When you hear, you know that you're hearing.
ကြားတယ်နော်
Now you know that you're hearing?
ပြန်သိတယ်နော်
You know, yeah? Okay.
ဒီစား
Are you very sure? Yes.
အနံ့ကတော့သမင်းစားကနေမှပဲကြည့်တော့ဟုတ်လား
And smell? Well, maybe only at lunchtime or dinner time. Not so obvious.
လူတယောက်မှာဒွါရ6ပုံတိเสีย6မျိုးအာယုံ6မျိုးရှိတယ်တိเสียဒါလိုက်ဒိုက်စိတ်နဲ့ဒိုင်းရသိလို့ရတဲ့အာယုံ6မျိုးပဲရှိတယ်ပုံမရှိဘူး
Things that we can know directly, things that we can be mindful of, is only 6. There's not more than 6 things that we can be aware of. Seeing, smelling, hearing, touching. Seeing, smelling, hearing, touching. What's the other one?
Taste.
Tasting and
Body sensing and touching and mind.
And whatever is happening in the mind. Yeah?
ပြောချင်တာကကိုယ်သတိထားဖို့အားသိစိုက်ကြမလို့ပါတိဖို့ကကိုယ်ပြန်သိဖို့အားသိစိုက်ကြမလို့လို့ပြောချင်တယ်
So what Sayadaw is trying to emphasize is that to know yourself, to be aware of yourself, does not require much focusing or a lot of energy.
ခုနလိုအဲ့လိုသတိလေးသိနေတာကိုတနေ့ကိုလုံးရင်မရဘူးလား
And could you maybe, could you imagine that you could be aware like that, just using that amount of energy the whole day long?
ပြန်မလား
Could you be aware like that all day long? Would you find it very tiring?
ပြန်မပါ
Not so tiring. No.
အားဆိုင်တယ်ပြန်ပါတိတ်အားထဲတာမှလူကတင်းနေကြက်နေမှတော့ပြန်မတာတနေ့ကိုမလုပ်နိုင်
It's only if we have to put in a lot of energy, we get tense, we get stressed, then we get tired.
တတိဆိုတာမမေ့တာအဲ့တတိကိုဆွဲဆွဲမြဲမြဲဖြစ်အောင်ကြိုးစားတာဝိရိယရဲ့လို့
So sati means not forgetting, and to continue to use sati moment after moment all day long. As much as you can, that's called effort.
ဝိရိယကဘာလုပ်လဲဆိုရင်အာယုံကိုမြင်အောင်အတင်းလိုက်မကြည့်ဘူးတတိရှိတာကိုဆွဲမပြောက်အောင်ကြိုးစား
So what does effort do? Effort does not try to see the object clearly. Effort only tries to remember to be aware. Effort tries only to remember to not forget the moment, and then the next moment, and the next moment. So it's just trying to be aware, not trying to see the object clearly or anything.
တရားအထုတ်တယ်ဆိုတာအမြဲလုံးဝတည်းဆိုတာသဘောပေါက်ဖို့ရည်ကြည်တယ်
We need to understand that the practice of mindfulness or awareness is something that we need to do always for the rest of our lives.
ဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့စိတ်ဆိုတာဖြစ်ပြီးပြတ်သွားတယ်
And that's because the mind arises and passes away.
ကုသိုလ်စိတ်ဖြစ်ရင်ဖြစ်မဖြစ်ရင်အကုသိုလ်စိတ်ဖြစ်တယ်ဒါဒီတိုင်းမှာပဲ
If we are not cultivating wholesome states of mind, then the unwholesome states of mind will take place in the mind. This is nature.
အဲကြောင့်စိတ်ရဲ့ quality ကဖြစ်ပြီးပြတ်သွားတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ဘာကြံခဲ့လဲဆိုတော့တတိကြံခဲ့တယ်
And although the mind arises only to pass away, the mind has a potential. And every time it arises and passes away, it passes its potential over to the next mind. A legacy. It leaves a legacy for the next mind.
ကောင်းတဲ့စိတ်ပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်ကုသိုလ်စိတ်ပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်အကုသိုလ်စိတ်ပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်ဖြစ်ခွင့်များများပေးပြီးရင်သူ့အင်အားကြီးလာမှာအထုံးတာပဲကုသိုလ်စိတ်ပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်အကုသိုလ်စိတ်ပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်
So whatever sort of mind that we're trying to cultivate, whether we remember gratitude or we remember things that we're angry about, whatever mind we allow to come up again and again and again, that's the mind that we're cultivating. That's the mind that will get stronger and stronger.
ဒါကိုပါရမီဖြည့်တယ်လို့ခေါ်တယ်ကုသိုလ်စိတ်တွေအားကောင်းလာအောင်လုပ်တာတတိတွေအားကောင်းလာအောင်လုပ်တာကိုပါရမီဖြည့်တယ်ခေါ်တယ်
So when we are trying to remember in every moment to cultivate the good qualities of mind, then that is called fulfilling your perfections, paramis.
ပြောချင်တာတရားထုတ်တယ်ဆိုတာအချိန်ပိုင်းလောက်နဲ့လုပ်လို့မရဘူးအမြဲလုပ်ရမယ်လို့ပြောချင်တယ်
So it should be clear to us that if we want to practice the Dharma, that practicing part-time is not good enough.
အဲကြောင့်ဒီတတိပဋ္ဌာန်အားထုတ်ပြီးဆိုတော့အမြဲတမ်းအားထုတ်ရ
So if you want to practice Satipatthana, you have to practice all the time.
မနေ့အရာထားတယ်ညအယောင်တည်းတည်းတတိနဲ့နေဖို့ကြိုးစား
When you wake up in the morning, you have to make an intention, and then you have to try to be mindful all day long until you fall asleep. And only then, if you put in at least that much effort, the power of the Dhamma will become stronger and stronger in your life. This is the true nature of the Dhamma. But in trying to practice, Yada reminds us there is no need to put in too much energy. We need to relax and practice. Because the moment we put in too much energy, we're usually using the energies of greed or aversion or delusion. So he reminds us again, practice meditation, relax, don't put in too much energy, don't focus too hard, don't focus too much. Then you will find that it is not difficult. Then you will find that it's not difficult to be mindful all day long and not get tired.
So now the check
Another very important element when we meditate is to have right view. Some people ask Sayadaw, if I'm just knowing something, is that good enough? And Sayadaw says that's not good enough. We need to know the nature of what we are paying attention to. What we are observing, the objects we call them, the objects are what is happening, are the things that are happening in the body that we can know, and the things that are happening in the mind that we can know. These are our objects. And these are processes of happening in the mind and the body. Before we meditate, when we think of our mind and our body, we think of it as my mind and my body. But when we practice, we have to switch this view a little bit. We have to see that what we are observing is actually a process of the mind and the body. Instead of thinking of this as a person, we see that there are different processes at work. Processes of body at work and processes of mind at work. This is because when we think of ourselves as a person, it makes the defilements grow. It makes the unwholesome states of mind grow. When we think of this body and this mind as a person, the unwholesome states of mind are allowed to grow more easily, so that's why we call it wrong view. So that's why it's wrong. And the opposite, how do we have right view? Is to see that these processes are just nature. They are natural processes of mind and body. And what is nature? Nature means that this process is a process of cause and effect. There are causes, which we can also call conditions, that give rise to effects. And these effects become conditions for the next set of effects. And this is a process which is governed by the law of cause and effect. And that's why we call it nature. Instead of seeing it as a person or a being.
စဉ်းစားပြီးမှသူဒီတဘာဝကိုသိချင်စိတ်နဲ့စောင့်ကြည့်တာတတိထားကြည့်
And when we meditate, we observe this mind and body and its processes.
ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တ attva အနေနဲ့မမြင်မဲနဲ့တဘာဝလို့စဉ်းစားပြီးတော့သူဒီတဘာဝကိုနားလည်ခြင်းနဲ့သိချင်တဲ့စိတ်နဲ့စောင့်ကြည့်
So when we observe this process of mind and body, our aim is to understand this process, understand this natural law at work, and that's why we are observing instead of just observing this as a person.
တတိထားတာရည်ရွယ်ချက်ကပါဘာလို့တတိထား
So why are we being aware? What's the objective of mindfulness, of meditation?
ဆရာခိုင်း
Because the teacher told you to be mindful?
ဘာဖြစ်လို့တတိထား
Why should we be mindful?
motivation ရှိရတယ်
So
ဘာလို့တတိထားလဲဆိုတော့တတိထားတဲ့ရည်ရွယ်ချက်တစ်ခုရှိတယ်တော့သိချင်စိတ်ရှိတယ်သိချင်လို့တတိထားတာရယ်နောက်တတိခုနပြောတယ်တတိထားတိုင်းမှာခုနပုံ၅ပါးကိုဖြစ်ခွင့်ပေးတာ
So why should we be mindful? Sayadaw says there's two reasons. One is time of Peter.
တတိထားတဲ့ပုံ၅ပါးကိုပွားပြီးသားဖြစ်ပွားများတာသူကသိချင်တယ်စုံစမ်းတယ်
So the first thing is that
information စု
when we are mindful, we know what is happening in the present moment. We get information. And the second thing is that every moment of mindfulness, those 5 faculties, they are wholesome qualities, they work together. And so every moment of mindfulness is a moment of wholesomeness. And you are cultivating that wholesome quality over and over and over again.
ဉာဏ်ကဘာကြောင့်ဖြစ်လဲဆိုတတိရှိမှဉာဏ်ဖြစ်အဲ့တော့သိချင်တယ်ဆိုရင်တတိထားကြည့်
And wisdom arises in the presence of sati. And that's why we also want to be mindful, so that wisdom can be allowed to grow.
ပန်းနိုင်ကငြိမ်ဖို့မဟုတ်သိဖို့
So the goal of meditation is not peacefulness. It's not to be still and calm and quiet. It's to understand.
ဝိပဿနာကအမှန်တိုင်းသိဖို့ဆိုတော့သိအောင်လည်းကြိုးစားကြောက်ဖို့ကြိုးစားတာမဟုတ်ထိန်းချုပ်ဖို့ကြိုးစားတာမဟုတ်
The purpose of vipassana is to know things as they really are. So we're not trying to control anything and we're not trying to change anything. We're trying to understand things as they really are.
ဘာဖြစ်နေဖြစ်မှသိဖို့ပဲ
What's happening now? You want to know what's happening now as it is.
ဥပမာစိတ်ငြိမ်လည်းငြိမ်မှန်းသိတယ်မငြိမ်လည်းမငြိမ်မှန်းသိတယ်မငြိမ်တိုင်းကိုငြိမ်အောင်လိုက်လုပ်နေတာမဟုတ်
So for example, when the mind is busy, you just recognize the mind is busy. This is knowing the truth of what is happening as it is. If the mind is quiet, you just know the mind is quiet. It's the knowing that's important.
မငြိမ်တော့ငြိမ်အောင်လိုက်လုပ်နေတာမဟုတ်
So we're not trying to make a busy mind become quiet. That's not the purpose of meditation.
မငြိမ်တော့ငြိမ်အောင်လုပ်ပြီးဆိုရင်သူကအားရအများကြီးဆက်ရတော့
Because if we're trying to change what's happening now, if we want a busy mind to become quiet, then we're going to start to have to use a lot of energy to try to achieve what we want.
အဲ့တော့သဘောထားမှန်တာအတူမှန်တာအယူဆမှန်တာအများကြီးရေးကြည့်တယ်သူကအယူဆမှန်ပြီဆိုစိတ်ကငြိမ်သွားတယ်
So having the right attitude, the right view, and the right understanding, the right idea about how to practice meditation, once we have all this, the mind is naturally steady.
ခုနပြောသလိုယောဂီတော်တော်များများပြဿနာဖြစ်တာအတွေးအတန်နာလာချင်းတိုင်းဒီသုံးခုမှာသူ့နဘာလုံးနေတာများသူတွန်းနေတာများဆွဲလိုက်တွန်းလိုက်ပေါ့
And mostly yogis have the most trouble and the most of our wrong attitudes and wrong views towards the experiences of thinking mind, towards the experience of sound, loud or noisy as we consider it, and towards the experience of pain. So what should our attitude be towards these experiences? How should we think about them? So he'll ask you some questions to help you think about it. When we meditate, should the mind be thinking a lot or not thinking at all? Is a lot of thinking good or less thinking good? What do you like? Sorry?
Less thinking.
Everybody likes less thinking. Oh, good crowd. So guess what happens when there's more thinking? You get upset. Yeah. You lose your stability of mind. You lose your samadhi. And it's not because the mind is thinking more that you lose your samadhi. You lose your samadhi because of your wrong idea that less thinking is better. If you understood that meditation is just about recognizing what is happening now, then when there's a lot of thinking, you're like, oh, there's a lot of thinking. When there's less thinking, oh, there's less thinking. Our job is not to complain about what's happening. Our job is to acknowledge what's happening. This is happening now. When we have a lot of ideas about what should be and shouldn't be, the mind has a lot of pushing and pulling, liking, disliking. Then we have no samadhi, no steadiness of mind. So a lot of thinking does not disturb your samadhi. It's disliking mind that disturbs your samadhi. Aversion, dosa. So when you're meditating, is it better if your environment is noisy, or is it better if your environment is quiet? It doesn't matter? Wow, we're getting good. Now you have some information, you're starting to use your information. Very good. There's lots of yogis out there who are still wrestling with noise and aversion. Every time they hear a sound, they're like, oh God, they have anger again, aversion again. But for Vipassana practitioners, for Vipassana practice, sound is not a disturbance. Sound is just an object. Oh, now there is sound. So if we have this sort of understanding and information, then Sayadaw says, whatever we face, we realize this is an object. Then we say, oh, this is happening now. And what we develop is awareness, steadiness of mind, and the Ditamadhi, and wisdom, because we are seeing what is happening as it is. So then we're meditating. We are yogis because we are developing wholesome qualities of mind upon whatever is happening in the present moment. What is the difference between yogis and those who are not yogis? We share the same objects. We're all humans. Yogis, non-yogis all have the same 6 objects, same physical and mental objects. And what happens to a non-yogi? They contact these objects and they have greed, aversion and delusion, non-yogis. Yogis, what do? They have right information, they apply right information, same objects, they develop awareness, steadiness of mind and wisdom. And only because the information they have is different. They know how to view these objects in the right way. That's applying right information. So it's so very important to have the right ideas and the right understanding. Is it better to not have pain or to have pain?
Nobody like pain.
But in actual fact, when we have pain, our mind automatically doesn't like pain.
ဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့ idea ကယူတွက်ထားတာတပိန်းကမကောင်းဘူးယူထားတာလို့
Because our memory of pain, so our idea about pain is that it is not good. This is our judgment.
စိတ်ကကောင်းတယ်လို့ယူရင်ဆွဲမယ်မကောင်းလို့ယူတော့တယ်
Whenever the mind has judged something as good, the mind will think it's good. The mind will like it. Whenever the mind has judged something as not good, the mind will not like it.
အဲ့တော့ပိန်းကိုဒါလည်းတရားထုတ်တဲ့ချိန်မှာပိန်းကိုဘယ်လိုစဉ်းစားမလဲတော့ရုပ်ဖောက်ပြန်တယ်သဘောတရားဒါတဘာဝအဲ့လိုနှလုံးသွင်းလိုက်တာနဲ့သူကလက်ခံပြီးသားဖြစ်သွားပြီသူ့ရှုရမယ်လက်ခံပြီးသားဖြစ်သွားပြီအဲ့တော့မှသတိထားရတာပြောရတော့
So when we have pain, what we need to remember is that pain is actually also a physical process that's happening in the body. And we want to understand this process.
တရားမှာကောင်းတယ်မကောင်းတယ်မရှိဘူး
Hopefully, when we think of it this way, the mind won't dislike the pain anymore. If there's no disliking, the mind can observe the pain in a more balanced way. In nature, there is nothing that is good and bad. They are all just nature.
ပူတာကောင်းလားမကောင်းလားအေးတာကောင်းလားမကောင်းလားပြောလို့မရဘူးကောင်းလားမကောင်းလားမပူတာပူလေးတဘာဝပဲအေးတာတဘာဝ
Is it good when it's hot or it's good when it's cold? Yeah, because hot has its nature and cold has its nature.
မိုးရွာတာကောင်းလားမကောင်းလား
Is it good if it rains or if it doesn't rain?
အေးတာကောင်းလားမကောင်း
Is it good when it's sunny or is it better when it's not sunny?
Today's beautiful day
တော့ပြောရဲဟို discipline ဆိုဝရိယရှိအဲ့ဒါတွေအရေးမကြီးဘူးစိတ်ကကြံ့ခိုင်
အဲဝရိယနဲ့ဉာဏ်ရှိမှရမှာပေါ့
And for that you need to have wisdom.
အဲနောက်တစ်ခုကလေမုန်တိုင်းကြတာကောင်းလားမကောင်းဘူး
Is it good if there's a storm or not good if there's a storm?
ကောင်းတယ်မကောင်းလားကိုယ့်အယူဆပါကောင်းတယ်မကောင်းလားကိုယ့်အယူဆ
Yeah. Well, whatever we feel about it, that's our opinion. That's our judgment of what's
Nature
happening.
ကတော့သူ့အလုပ်သူလုပ်တာပဲသူ့အကြောင်းရှိသူဖြစ်မှာဒါသူကကောင်းတယ်ဆိုတယ်ပြောလို့မရဘူး
Nature has its own reasons for happening. Nature happens when there is enough conditions and reasons for it to happen, and it'll just happen. To say that it's good or bad is, it's just what we say.
အိမ်မီးတော့မကောင်းလားမကောင်း
Is it good if the house catches fire or is it not good?
insurance ပေးထားတဲ့ကောင်ကြိုက်တယ်
He says that the guy who has insurance on his house, he might be all right if the house catches fire.
အဲ့ပါတော့ပြောချင်တာနေချောကိုကောင်းတယ်ဆိုတော့မတတ်မှတ်ပဲနဲ့အရှိရှိတိုင်းမစဉ်းစားအဲ့ဒါဆိုရင်သူကကြိုက်တာမကြိုက်တာမလာတော့လက်ခံနိုင်တယ်ပြီးတော့မှဒီတဘာဝကိုသိချင်စိတ်နဲ့စောင့်ကြည့်ပြောချင်တာကဒီနေချောကိုကောင်းတယ်မကောင်းတယ်လို့ judge မလုပ်ပဲနဲ့အရှိတိုင်းစဉ်းစားနိုင်ရင်စိတ်ကလက်ခံပြီးတော့သူ့လိလာလို့ရ
So the point is that if we set aside our judgments for a while, instead of thinking of what is happening in the present moment as a good or bad experience, if we would remind ourselves that this is nature, this is a process of nature, and we want to understand what it is, that might help the mind to settle down and not react so that we can actually observe the process and see what it is.
Soတရားအထုတ်ရင်အနောက်ချက်ဆိုတာရှိအောင်ဘယ်အာရုံအနောက်ချက်ပေးအောင်
And if we were able to do this successfully, would you find anything disturbing to your meditation at all? Theoretically, no. Well, hopefully.
အာယုန်နဲ့ဘယ်အာယုန်မှအနောက်ချက်မပေးဘူးအာယုန်နဲ့အလုံးဘယ်အာယုန်တိုင်းကအထောက်ပံ့ပေးတယ်ဘာဖြစ်စေဖို့လဲတတိဖြစ်ဖို့သမာဓိဖြစ်ဖို့ဉာဏ်ဖြစ်ဖို့ထောက်ပံ့ပေးတယ်
The truth is that if we have the right attitude, no object is a disturbance at all. All objects are there to support us to build awareness, samadhi, and panya. Sati, samadhi, and panya.
ကိုမှ right view ရှိရင်ပြော
That is if you have right view and right attitude.
ဟိုကိလေသာဖြစ်ရင်တော့ကိလေသာကိုအာယုံဖြစ်ယူပြီးတော့စိတ်မှာသတိတမဏိဉာဏ်ဖြစ်အောင်လုပ်လို့ရတယ်
Even if there was a defilement that you were observing, even if it was an unwholesome state of mind that you were observing, say there's anger, And if you reminded yourself that this is neither good nor bad, this is a process of nature, and you want to understand how it works, and you just observe what is happening now, you might understand something deeper about it and become free of it.
So, we better not to the camera. Right view of Yejide. Now, I'm Simon, Tajato Yejide.
So, in Vipassana practice, the two most important things are to have right view, right attitude, the right idea, and then the second thing is to not put in too much effort. Remember, relax and practice continuously. Relax and don't forget the present moment continuously. Yep, these two. So the meditating yogi has three basic things they need to do. So the first thing we need to do, so the three things. Number one is to have the right view and the right attitude about what is happening, what you're observing. Okay? The second thing is to be aware. The third thing is to continue to be aware with awareness and right view. Continue. We have to maintain that awareness and right view. And that's called right effort. So these are the basic sort of principles of meditation. So when you start meditation, maybe you want to use a single object to build your mindfulness at first. And you can use anything that you are familiar with or that you prefer. And initially, it's not easy to just know the mind as an object. So it might be easier to take something in the body as an object, like your breath, or the movement of your body when you breathe in and out, your heartbeat, things like that. Sensations. Touching sensations, hearing, heat and hot and cold sensations, things like that might be easier. If you want to also use seeing as an object, you can. Will you be able to practice with your eyes open? Will you be able to remember to notice that you are seeing whenever you are seeing, which is almost all the time? Most of us don't know how to meditate with our eyes open. And no object is better than another. Whatever you know now is the best object for now. No object is better. Every object is equal. Remember that object means whatever the mind is knowing now, that has become the object. So if you want to use one particular point as an anchor, as a beginning object, you can. Or if you just want to know the whole body as a whole, like you're sitting or you're walking or you're standing, if you just want to recognize the whole body, that's fine too. Just feeling it. And when you just know the whole body, sometimes some sensations might be stronger, sometimes some other sensations might be stronger. You can change objects. It's okay.
အာရုံပြောင်းတာရေးမကြည့်ဘူးတတိဆက်ဆက်မှုပဲအရေးကြီး
It doesn't matter what the object is. What is important is the mindfulness is continuous. That means you are always aware. Awareness is what is going on.
ခြေတိုင်းထားတဲ့လူကလည်းဒီခြေတိုင်းတစ်ခုတည်းယူခိုင်းတာမဟုတ်ဒီခြေတိုင်းပေးတယ်ဆိုတာတတိရှိအောင်ပေးတာတဖြည်းဖြည်းနဲ့တခြားအာရုံတွေပါတဖြည်းဖြည်းသိနိုင်ရင်ပိုကောင်းတယ်
And
ညများသိလာရင်တတိပိုအားကောင်းတယ်
when he says you can use an anchor or one object, it is not for you to get attached to it. Okay, the idea is that it helps you to build awareness so that when awareness is stronger, it helps you to know many more objects.
ချိန်ထဲမှာအာရုံတစ်ခုသုံးခုလောက်သိလာပြီဆိုတတိပိုထက်မြက်လာပြီတတိအားကောင်းလာပြီ
If in one moment you can know several objects, if that happens to you, what you need to know is that that means the awareness is stronger at that time when it's knowing more objects. Okay?
ဒါအသေးပဲဘာပြလဲဆိုစိတ်ကခန္ဓာကိုယ်မှာကပ်နေပြီတတိကောင်းနေပြီလို့ပြောတယ်
When the mindfulness settles into the mind and body, that's how it feels. It feels like you know many things happening in the mind and body at the same time.
အတွေ့ဘယ်လိုအားထုတ်ရမလဲဆိုအတွေ့မှန်းသိရမယ်အတွေ့ကအနောက်ရှက်လို့မယူဘူးအတွေ့ကစိတ်နံတရားတစ်ခုပဲကိုအာယုံတစ်ခုပဲဇလန်းမလို့အဓိကမထားဘူးဖြစ်လာတာတော့သိပြီရ
And finally, what do we do with the thinking mind? The thinking mind is also an object. We are to know the mind is thinking. We must remember that mind is also a natural process. Thinking is a natural process in the mind. We are not rejecting it. We are recognizing the mind is thinking. We are not looking at the story inside the thought. It's not about your uncle or auntie or your high school days or your future. It's about the fact that in the present moment, the mind is thinking. That's what you're looking at.
TV ခန္ဓာပဲပြန်လာအောင်ပြန်အာရုံယူဘာလို့အတွေ့အကြုံမကြည့်နေမနိုင်သေးဘူးပါတော့လေ
And once you have recognized that the mind is thinking now, don't continue to look at the thinking mind because we will get lost in that story about the uncle, auntie and so on. So once you recognize the mind is thinking now, know that and then go back to whatever you were observing just now, whether it was body sensations or something else. Yep.
အတွေ့ကိုအာရုံလို့နားမလဲဒီကြာကြည့်ပါတော့လေ
So we need to alternate between those two because when we don't yet know that what is thinking is the mind, we get lost in the story.
ဆိုတော့အတွေ့ကိုကြည့်လိုက်ခန္ဓာကိုယ်ပဲပြန်ကြည့်လိုက်ရတာပြဿနာမဟုတ်ဒါအားထုတ်နေတာရွာလဲနေတာမဟုတ်ဒါအားထုတ်နေတာ
So when you let yourself acknowledge the mind is thinking, oh this is hot sensation, the mind is thinking, I know the breath, the mind is thinking, I know the breath, the mind is thinking, I know the breath, that is not wandering mind. You are being mindful, right? You know the mind is thinking, you know the breath, you know. So that's mindfulness, continuous mindfulness, yes? Sayadaw says you are not wandering around the village, you are being mindful, okay?
Wandering mind ဆိုတာကlost and found ပြောတွေးနေမျောနေတာ wandering ခေါ်တယ်တတိပြောက်နေတာ wandering လို့ခေါ်တယ်တွေးတော့သိတာ wandering mind မဟုတ်
The only time that you have wandering mind is when you are completely lost in thought. You had no mindfulness at all. You didn't even know you were thinking. And then you remember, oh my God, I wasn't aware at all. Then it's fine. Now you are aware, you carry on. But when you know the mind is thinking, that is awareness.
မတွေးအောင်ကြိုးစားတာမဟုတ်ဘူးတွေးမှန်းသိအောင်ကြိုးစားတာ
So meditation is not trying to stop thinking. It is about recognizing that thinking is happening.
အဲ့ဒီယူဆလေးတွေအရေးကြီးတယ်ဒီယူဆလေးတွေမှန်လို့ရှိရင်တရားတော့လွယ်လွယ်လေးထက်ဘူး
If we understood these little things, if we had these little right views, then practicing is very much easier.
အဲ့ဒီမကြောက်တဲ့လူတွေကတရားတော့ခက်တယ်ကိုထင်တာနေရှောက်လို့ဆိုတော့ခက်တယ်
But when we haven't heard these things, we feel like it's so difficult because we are fighting with all these things that are natural and that we just need to know.
စိတ်ဆိုတာတွေးမှာပဲတွေးတတ်လို့ပဲသူ့နာမည်တပ်ပြီးတာစိတ်လို့ခေါ်တယ်
The mind's nature is to think. In fact, in the definition of mind, it is said that it thinks, therefore it is mind. So how do you stop that? You have a mind, it will think.
မတွေးအောင်လုပ်ဘူးဆိုရင်ဒါမဖြစ်နိုင်တာလို့တော့
So if you're trying to stop the mind from thinking, you're trying to do the impossible.
ဝိပဿနာ idea ကမတွေးအောင်လုပ်တာမဟုတ်တွေးမှန်းသိအောင်လုပ်တာ
So the practice of vipassana is not to stop thinking, it is to recognize that thinking is happening in the present moment. Thinking mind is an object that you want to be aware of. And particularly as we continue practicing and our practice grows, understanding thinking mind becomes very, very important. Sound is also an object. Sound is not an object outside you. Sound is what comes to your eardrum, what hits your eardrum, that's the sound you hear. So sound is an internal object. And whatever you hear, it's just hearing. It's not the yogi came into the Dhamma hall and she is so noisy. No, it's hearing sound. So what we are recognizing, the experience we're recognizing is that sound is being heard, not going into not thinking about what we are hearing. Yeah? So again, if we have the right understanding and the right view and the right attitude, we don't get disturbed. We have awareness, we have steadiness of mind, and we develop wisdom instead of greed, aversion, and delusion. With pain, we remind ourselves that pain is not a bad object, pain is another nature of this body. Which I just said question. But before we observe pain, we need to remind ourselves that pain is natural, particularly if we've been sitting meditation and we haven't been moving. When you don't move the body for a while, there will be discomfort, right? So discomfort is natural. But our mind's habit is that when the body or the mind is uncomfortable, it doesn't like it. And we need to recognize this. So instead of looking at the pain, we are going to watch the mind to see and recognize the discomfort that's coming up in the mind about the pain or discomfort in the body. Once the way we are trying to observe the object becomes uncomfortable, we feel it's difficult to watch something, it means there's some aversion in the mind that's trying to meditate. We shouldn't try to watch that object anymore. We need to watch that aversion in the mind that's meditating, that feeling of discomfort. So Sayadaw gives an analogy. Sayadaw says, say there's somebody in your life that you dislike intensely, and you think about this person that you don't like, again and again. What happens when you think about someone that you do not like? Do we get more and more angry? Yes. So it's the same way. When there is pain in the body, it's like somebody that you dislike. And then you keep looking at that pain, it just reminds you that you don't like it. And that disliking grows and grows. So you don't look at the pain, you look at that mind that does not like. And then you need to change the mood of the mind. The mind is disliking, you need to change that mood. Use right view, use right attitude to try and adjust the mind and see whether it can come back to a more If by trying to adjust the attitude, you find that the mind becomes more accepting, it's like, okay, it feels all right, then you can try to watch the pain, but not otherwise. If you cannot adjust the mind, it cannot feel more comfortable, you cannot watch the pain. So we want to be meditating in all postures. We want to be aware all the time because we want to cultivate it. So it's pretty simple. If you're walking, you know you're walking. If you're doing something, you know you're doing something. So say you're walking, you might find it easiest to notice that your legs are moving because that's what is moving the most. Or you might notice some other things that are moving on your body. You can be aware of anything that's happening while you're walking. What is important is that there is mindfulness, that you are aware of this body and mind process in the present moment. Sarah does not ask us to walk slowly. We can walk naturally because this is a natural process that we want to understand.
But
what we do want to know, what we do want is to be aware continuously for a long, long time. Because the longer we are aware, the more the awareness settles, the more we know of what is happening in the body and the mind. So even if you start just by knowing the movements of the legs or the feet, or just the touching sensation when you put your feet down, even if you start with just that, if you are mindful continuously for a long time, you'll start to know more and more sensations, and after a while you can know the whole body as it's walking.
And
you need to bring that sort of awareness into every part of your daily living. So when you move, you want to know you move. When you put things down, when you open doors, when you close doors, when you brush your teeth, when you wash your hair, everything you want to be aware of. From waking up, knowing that you're waking up until you fall asleep. Every moment is a moment for awareness.
So
that's the basics about meditation. Does anyone have any questions?
Question about when you talk about let the mind do all the work and meditation, the mind does that. Can you actually doing that, seeing that the mind does everything without the consciousness or whatever? I mean,
without
doing anything. The unconscious mind actually do everything.
Oh, the unconscious. Oh, sick at again. I can't know lie low there, so that thing lo yala.
The best
the better our mindfulness becomes, the more the mindfulness sees the mind, and also you need wisdom. Wisdom needs to grow because some things you cannot see, some things have to be understood by wisdom. And when the more mindfulness and more wisdom you have, the more you will know about how much the mind does. Yeah? In fact, knowing how to know the mind is a kind of wisdom. Not everybody knows how to watch the mind or know the mind. Because the mind doesn't have a place, there is no shape, no color, it's not got a form. You can't put it somewhere and look at it, you know, but you can know that it's mind. When the mind works, you know. When the mind arises, you know.
So
with lots of practice and lots of recognizing different things in the mind, we begin to recognize this is mind and know that this is what the mind does. And then we can know more and more about the mind.
Can I ask more on
Sure.
that subject?
Sure.
For example, like when I sit, I try to watch the pain, right? That would be the old practice, that would be with a rise and fall.
Right.
And when I said, well, I don't have the pain. So suddenly when I get some pain in my knee, at that time, I can see the sensation from the body come out to the knee, the cramping sensation. When there, they no more pain. The mind just goes, oh, I can't do anything. So I kept asking, is that true? Is that just my illusion, or that's actually happening?
သူကနားတဲ့အခါမှာဟိုအရင်သူ
ရှုနေကြတယ်နားတော့ရှု
ဟိုအရင်အဟောင်းမှာသူကနားရာကိုမလို့ခြင်းလို့ပြောရင်နားတဲ့ကြားရသူစိတ်ကဟိုကောင်းတဲ့ခံစားမှုအဲ့ကိုပို့လိုက်တယ်လို့ပဲအဲ့ဒါဆိုရင်သူပျောက်သွားတယ်အဲ့သူကစိတ်ကဖန်တီးတာလားမှို့တော့သူဖြစ်တာသူသိလို့မရဘူး
အခုပဲသူပြောနေတဲ့ထဲမှာပါပြီးတော့ပြီ
So Did you not mention while you were saying that your mind said you don't want the pain, and then you can feel a pleasant sensation going there?
I'm looking for the pain because I want to see that pain. I want to learn. I want to observe it, but I can't. The mind to do it myself. It's that pain.
So you said.
သူကစောင့်ကြည့်ခြင်းနဲ့ဟိုဒေါ်လာကမလုပ်ခြင်းမလုပ်ခြင်း
သူကစောင့်ကြည့်ခြင်းနဲ့ဒါပေမဲ့စိတ်က
ဒေါ်လာကလုပ်လိုက်ပြီ
ကောင်းတဲ့ခံစားမှုကိုသူပို့လိုက်တယ်
တက်တောင်လုပ်လိုက်တာမကြိုက်
ဘူးဒေါသလုပ်တော့ဘူး
ဘာဖြစ်ဖြစ်
လောဘလုပ်တော့ဘူး
လောဘကကောင်းအောင်စဉ်းစားလိုက်တာဒါပြောင်းလိုက်တာပဲအာယုံပြောင်းလိုက်တာပဲ
Yeah
တက်တောင်လို့ပြောင်းလိုက်တာပဲ
So you did say that the mind does it by itself. So the mind is doing something. The mind doesn't like pain, but it's doing something to make itself feel better. And clearly your mind is very successful at it. Because not every mind is. သူစိတ်ကတော့အောင်မြင်တယ်စိတ်တိုင်းအောင်မြင်မှာမဟုတ်
ဟုတ်ဒါကတော့တီးလို့ပါတကယ်ကြီးလိုက်လို့မရတော့ဘူး
And it's only because it's probably a manageable sort of pain. If it was a pain that was much more severe, you might not have the same success.
နေမလဲထွက်ပြီးလုပ်ကြည့်ရတယ်ပူတာဘာမှမကြိုက်ဘူးမကြိုက်တော့ကောင်းတယ်လို့စဉ်းစားကြည့်အဲ့ပူတာကောင်းလာတယ်ဟုတ်တယ်ဟောလုပ်ကြည့်ပြီးကောင်းတယ်လို့စဉ်းစားရင်တော့ကောင်းလာတယ်
အမြဲမဖြစ်ပါဘူး
နိစိတ်ပြောင်းရင်ကောင်းတယ်
စိတ်ပြောင်းSo the other says you can try standing in the sun and telling yourself, like it's very hot, telling yourself that it feels good. And if your mind can start feeling good, the sun will start feeling good. So it's just whether the mind can change or not. If you can change the mind, it can change what it feels. Yeah? So you'reစိတ်ကိုမကြိုက်တဲ့ဟာကိုရကောင်းပါတယ်လို့အဲ့လိုမျိုးလုပ်တာလိန်ပြောတာစိတ်ကိုလိန်ပြောတာမဟုတ်ဘူးလားတဲ့ဘာလို့ဆိုစိတ်ကတကယ်အရှိတိုင်းသိရမှာမဟုတ်လားတဲ့ neutral ဖြစ်အောင်ကြည့်ရမှာ Yes, you're right. We should be neutral before we observe to see what it really is. He's just saying that the mind can do funny stuff with us. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you know whether or not mind plays tricks on us?
How would we know whether the mind is playing tricks on us?
Yeah.
စိတ်ကကိုတဲ့စားလို့ဘယ်လိုလုပ်သိလို့ရမလဲ
အဲ့စိတ်လေးသားတော့ခဏစိတ်ကိုတတိထားတတ်မှရမှာပေါ့
If you know how to watch your mind, you will know when it's trying to trick you. You will begin to recognize. Yeah.
Tu lo da niမြင်မှ tu ဖြစ်တိုင်းသိလာမှ
So that's why we need to be mindful all the time so that we see how the mind works all the time. Then we can recognize.
ဘာလို့စဉ်းစားလဲဘာလို့ခံစားရလဲ
What does the mind think? What does it feel?
သူ activity တွေသိအောင်လုပ်
All its activities. Yeah. Otherwise, the mind is lying to us all the time, and we're just all the time being carried away. So all of you have a mind?
Yes.
Yeah. You're very sure. You know your mind. Where do you look for your mind? Do you know where your mind is? How do you know? How can you tell him that you have a mind? What is it that you know that makes you so sure that you have a mind? It's not the place, right?
Because we know.
We know. He knows it. Yeah. So if you know the mind, you must be able to tell him something about the mind. Maybe you don't have the words, that's all. But you do know something about the mind. Is the mind a body, or a bodily or a mental process?
Thinking.
Huh? Wait, oh sorry. Is thinking the mind or the body? Is thinking in the body or the mind? Or is just thinking happen in the body or the mind? In the mind. So you see, that's how you can know the mind. That's why he's asking us to know thinking mind. Now, we are trying to stop the mind from thinking. So don't we want to know the mind? Because the thinking is in the mind. That's how we will know the mind. What is thinking is the mind. When you don't know that thinking is happening, you are knowing the mind. What else does the mind do that you can tell him that the mind does that? What else does the mind do?
It's control the whole body. Tell the body moves everything.
Kanako, like kindness. Okay, tells the mind body what to do. It's like a boss.
Intention,
you can say the mind plans, and then it has intentions. Yeah. Yeah. And these we know as thoughts as well, right? The mind says do this, and then we do it.
Oh, it's too fast.
Too fast. Sometimes yes, too fast. Anything else?
Emotion.
Yeah.
Emotions.
Emotions about state feeling.
So we can feel, right? So the mind feels, and that's how we know emotions, right? What? Intentions? Focusing.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
Focusing. So it pays attention, right? Understanding. The bulk out there, let's say that. So if you know these things that the mind does, it means you know the mind. You're watching. If we don't at least know what the mind is, we won't be able to know the mind, watch the mind. So when you recognize these things, like the mind is understanding, or the mind is paying attention, do you focus on anything? Is there any place that you focus your attention? No. You just know, right? So the mind has no place. But if we practice a lot, knowing what the mind is doing, like thinking, understanding, etc., we become more and more familiar with realizing that this is just mind at work. This is the mind. This is the mind. We learn how to view it as mind. Yeah. We know how to objectively look at it. Almost like we're holding it. It's like, this is mind. Physical is much easier to pinpoint, right? Physical is much easier to focus on. So to know how to be mindful of the mind, we need a lot of practice.
It seems that we have to use, the sixth sense to know the mind.
Mind go.
Six door,
six doors of mind go.
The 6 doors includes the mind, yeah? 5 of them are.
We have to use, just like we have to use the eyes and hearing, tasting, smelling, to know the mind, to understand the mind, how the mind is working.
Oh, right. သူကပြောတယ်ဟိုဒီဂျန်တဲ့ဒွါရတွေကိုသုံးပြီးတော့ကိုကစိတ်ကဘလို့အလုပ်လုပ်လဲလို့ကိုသိလို့ရတယ်။
မင်းစိတ်ကဘာဖြစ်လဲမင်းစိတ်ကဘယ်လိုခံစားလဲ
They work together. You know, the body and the mind
Yes.
work together.
Yes, they do.
That's
So
better.
whenever you see, whenever you hear, the mind does things, and you can see the connection.
စိတ် reaction ရှိတယ်အတွေးခေါ်ရှိတယ်
The mind will have reactions. It has ideas. It has concepts.
ခံစားတာရှိတယ်
It feels. It thinks.
Love, hate.
Love, hate. သူကချစ်တယ်မုန်းတယ်
ဟုတ်ပါတယ်
Yep.
အဲ့ဒါခံစားမှုရသိ
Yep, and we feel that, right? That's how we know what they are.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဟုတ်ကဲ့
When we're thinking about all these emotions, how do we know if it's too strong? For example, we love, we're feeling that emotion of love. But do we describe it as too much love, excessive love, too little love, too much hate, too little hate?
ချစ်တယ်မုန်းတယ်ဆိုပါစို့တဲ့
လို့ intensity ရှိတယ်လေ
ဘယ်လိုလို့လဲနဲ့လွန်လားများလားနဲ့ဟိုတိတ်လုံးအချီလားလဲလုံးအချီလားဘယ်လိုသိလဲ
ဒါကခုနပြောသလိုတဘာဝလက္ခဏာကိုသိမှရချစ်တာနဲ့ဆွဲလန်းတာနဲ့မတူဘူးရောနေတယ်အဲ့တော့ပေါင်းပြီးတော့ဖြစ်နေတာ
To understand that sort of thing, you need to look and watch the mind more closely and for much longer, because Sarah says every quality in the mind has its specific characteristics. For example, greed has its character. Right? Greed does certain things. It's sticky. It wants, never satisfied.
Attachment.
Right? Attachment is like that.
loving kindness
Yeah, loving kindness is not like that. Loving kindness is wholesome. It feels that everyone is equal. It feels love. It feels kindness, right? But when we love somebody, very often our feelings are mixed. There is some feelings of purity, of wanting to give, of wanting to look after, of wanting to protect, and all that. All these, and then there's attachment, which is mixed in it. And attachment does its work. So attachment will want and not want to give up, right? It attaches, and it's then there's fear with that. So these are all mixed up. So you have to see them each for doing what they do. You can't lump them all into one word called loving too much or too little.
အဲ့တော့ချစ်နိုင်တယ်ချစ်ချင်တော့ချစ်ဣဒ္ဓမရှိဆွဲတော့ဆွဲ
So Sarah always says, if it's pure, love as much as you can, but don't get attached.
တော့ပြင်းအားရှိတယ်ပြင်းအားကိုကြည့်အတွေ့လေးချင်းများတယ်သူပြင်းအားဆိုတာရှိတယ်အဲ့စင်းရတာနဲ့ချမ်းသာတာနှစ်ခုကဟိုကုသိုလ်နဲ့အကုသိုလ်က feeling ရသိလို့ရ quality နဲ့သိလို့ရ
You can feel the intensity of each of these things, and what you want to notice is whether any feeling causes you suffering or whether it feels right. That's an indication of whether it's unwholesome or wholesome or mixed.
How do we know it's not delusion?
Delusion.
ဟုတ်အဲ့တော့ wisdom စိတ်မှာ wisdom ရှိတဲ့အချိန်မှာသိ
So you need to develop that wisdom.
ဘာလို့လဲ
You need to
wisdom
have-
delusion စတင်ပြ wisdom ဖြစ်နေတယ်
Yeah, because the antidote to delusion is wisdom. So we need to watch a lot, learn a lot. We begin to understand more. That's wisdom. Understanding is
wisdom
wisdom.
ဖြစ်တဲ့အခိုက်မှာသူခုနက delusion ဆိုတာအရင်ရှင်း
So when there is wisdom, then the delusion that we live under becomes very clear. Whatever we understand what we did not understand before that. It works that way.
On that subject of the wholesome and the mind and the sensation, I found that sometimes the unwholesome mind does pretend to give you the sense, feel good and things like that, but actually unwholesome to watch it very close by it pretend to be wholesome. No, is that true?
Yeah. တော့ပြောတဲ့ခါတလေကိလေသာတွေကဟိုကောင်းချင်အောင်ဆောင်တယ်တဲ့ဟုတ်လား
ဟုတ်တယ်
Yes, they do that. Because they want to get what they want, right?
အဲကြောင့်ဖြစ်တိုင်းမယုံတဲ့စိတ်ကိုတတိထားကြည့်ပါ
So that's why
လက်စစ်ပါ
Sarah
စုံစမ်းပါ
says, you don't just believe the mind right away. You always investigate, see what's happening in there.
again double check
Double check, he says.
ခိတိတာသူစလို့
Because the unwholesome qualities, they're tricky, you know. Their objective is to get their goal. They'll do anything to get it. They're ruthless.
ညာလည်းညာလို့ညာဘယ်တော့မယုံ
But wisdom does what wisdom does. Wisdom doesn't just believe. Wisdom must know for sure.
သူအမြဲတမ်းပြန်စစ်
So wisdom is always checking. Wisdom double checks.
ဝိညာဉ်မယုံ
Wisdom is not just a believer. Yes.
When you say investigate,
Yeah.
you also said don't judge, right? So
Mhm.
how do you know something is wholesome or something is polluted? Because it's in your thought, right?
Yeah.
And you investigate all the things that are associated with that thought. Because you're supposed to investigate.
So zona and karma.
So how do you investigate without judgment? Because is it wholesome? Is it or is it delusion?
Judgment မပါဘဲနဲ့ဘယ်လိုလုပ် investigate လုပ်မလဲတဲ့ဘာဆိုကိုကကြည့်ရင်ကိုကပြောတော့ပြောမယ်လေဒါကုသိုလ်လားဒါမောဟလား
အစမှာတော့ညာအားနေတဲ့ချိန်မှာခုနကပြော second knowledge ကူရတယ်ဒါတဘာဝပဲဆိုအရင်နှလုံးသွင်းမဟုတ်တော့ judgment အရင်ရောက်တယ်
So before we have our own like growing wisdom, this is first we need to borrow some wisdom. So that's all the information we get, right? We get that information. We try to see in our experience whether we can recognize any of those elements in our experience.
အဲကြောင့်ခုနကပြောတဘာဝပဲနှလုံးသွင်းလိုက်အဲ့ချိန်မှာသူက judgment မလုပ်တော့နှလုံးသွင်းပြီးတော့နိုင်တဲ့လောက်ရှုရတယ်အဲနည်းနည်းပြစားတယ်
And we need to remind ourselves that what we're observing, what's happening in the mind is just nature. So that there is some, if we remember that it's just nature, and we're not thinking this is my mind or this is what I feel, but this is what the mind is feeling or thinking, we might be unbiased enough to just see it for what it is doing, to see the connection and the relationship between those
အစ
activities.
မှာ unbiased ဆိုတာတိတ်တော့မဖြစ်ဘူး
To be unbiased instantly or immediately when we start, impossible, but we learn. That's part of the process of meditation, to learn. Yeah?
And ask one more question.
Sure.
Yes.
We want to learn, but the unwholesome mind is so powerful, so smart.
Yes.
And we got a picture. How can we try to not making so many mistakes? We make mistakes, we know that. But how can we learn not to make some fatal mistakes?
တော်ပြောရဲကိုကညာမကောင်းသေးဘူးဆိုရင်ねကိုဘယ်လိုလုပ်တင်ကန်းစာယူမလဲတဲ့ဆရာမရှိဘူးဆိုရင်ねကိုမ
အဲ
မှား
ကြောင့်
အောင်
ဒီကောင်း
ဘယ်
စီ
လို
ကော
လုပ်
င်း
မ
စီ
လဲ
ကိုလိုတာဗောဘယ်ကောင်းစီကောင်းစီကိုတက်တာမရှိဘူးကတော့တော်စဉ်းစား
Yeah မမှားအောင်ဘယ်လိုကိုမှားလို့ရတယ်လို့တော့သိတယ်တဲ့ဒါပေမဲ့ဥပမာဟိုဆိုးဆိုးဝါးဝါးမမှား
မမ
ပါ
အဲ့
ဘူး
တော့မိတ်ဆွေကောင်းစီကိုတက်တာ
Yeah
ကို
so
ယ့်အကိုယ်နဲ့ကြာတော့
yeah Sarah says good friends Kalyana Mitta is very important. Yes, we can make mistakes. Mistakes are part of the path of progress
ဉာဏ်
and
ရှိတဲ့လူက
understanding.
စိုးစိုးကားမဖြစ်ဘူး
But
ဉာဏ်မရှိလို့ခုနကိလေသာအားကြီးလို့ဖြစ်သွားတာ
yeah, but he said to not make a fatal mistake, Sarah says, even if we just use our own wisdom, which is usually common sense, even if we just use our common sense and our own intelligence, we can avoid many fatal mistakes. Yeah, Sarah says if we don't have good friends, we really have to rely on our own mind to think and think through clearly. And yeah.
အဓိကမောဟရဲ့ craving ဒီကောင်လည်းလုံးလိုက်တော့တော်တော်ကြီးကြီးဖြစ်မှာ
Yeah, it's only when the defilements or the unwholesome are very strong, yes, that they will cause us to make fatal mistakes because it doesn't give us time to think, right? Yeah, so a great craving, great aversion.
အဲကြောင့်တရားထုတ်တာတော့မမဲနဲ့လို့ပြောတယ်စဉ်းစားယူမှလောက်ရတယ်
So Sarah says that's why even in meditation, we should not be fixated or obsessed with doing something right, okay? Because if we obsess, it's again a great aversion of delusion at work. That's why he says relax and practice. Learn from the practice. Think about how to practice.
ဉာဏ်သုံးဉာဏ်ရှိတယ်သူတိုင်းမှာဉာဏ်ရှိတယ်
Don't be fixated, he says. Use our wisdom, use our intelligence.
အခုပြဿနာ
information.
ဖြစ်နေတာယောဂီတော်တော်များများဉာဏ်ကိုမသုံးမဲနဲ့အားထည့်တာများနေလို့
Right now what happens is a lot of yogis, they don't think about how to practice. They don't think about what they've heard about and apply it to see whether they're doing the right thing. They're just putting in a lot of energy and thinking they will get somewhere.
Focus
They're
on
hoping.
it. A low show near it.
You know, they're so busy focusing, trying to get somewhere. They're not thinking about whether it's useful or effective or right practice.